In this episode, we're going to break down the anatomy of a music note, talk about note values, and get you on your way to reading music. Welcome in for the special edition series of Swiss Cheese and Beats. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back in for another episode of Swiss Cheese and Beats. My name is Daniel Lascati, and I'm here to help you get better faster in percussion performance. So if you have yet to do so, please check out the other videos on the channel, as well as consider subscribing for future episodes. So this is going to be part one of a three-part series on how to read music. This episode is going to consist of the most basic fundamentals of reading music with a specific focus on reading rhythms. This is what I would consider as step one in learning how to read music before we get to actual note names or tones. So the very first thing you have to be able to do is you have to be able to identify what a music note looks like. There are three physical parts to a music note. The first part is going to be the note head. The note head can either be empty or it can be filled in. The second trait to a music note would be the stem. Most notes will have a stem, however there is a single note that does not have a stem. We'll get into that later. And the last physical part to a note would be a flag, and there can be more than one of these. Now, in determining what type of note we're looking at, we have to look at what type of note head we have, whether or not the note has a stem, and how many flags, if any, are attached to that stem. A whole note is an empty note head by itself without a stem and without any flags. A whole note is worth a total of 4 beats. The next note would be a half note. A half note is an empty note head just like the whole note, except this note head is attached to a stem. A half note is worth 2 beats. A quarter note is going to be our first note with a filled-in note head, and it also has a stem. A quarter note is worth 1 beat. The next note we're looking at is an eighth note. And an eighth note is a filled-in note head, it has a stem, and it also has 1 flag. An eighth note is worth half of a beat. And the last note we're going to focus on is a 16th note. A 16th note is a filled-in note head, has a stem, and it also has 2 flags. A 16th note is worth 1/4 of a beat. Now, a couple of things about the flags in 8th and 16th notes. If you were to put 2 eighth notes next to each other, their 2 flags come together to create what's called a beam. So sometimes you'll see 2 eighth notes that look like this where they're separated, and another time you'll see 2 eighth notes that are connected by a beam like so. They are the exact same rhythm, they just happen to look different. The same thing goes for 16th notes. 16th note has 2 flags. If you have 2 16th notes next to each other, they can be separated like so, or the flags come together to create 2 beams. Just like the eighth notes, these two may look different, however they are the exact same rhythm. So now, taking a look at how these notes fit into each other, we're going to draw what we call a rhythm tree. At the very top of our tree, we're going to have a whole note with 4 counts. And if we divided that up equally into 2, we would be able to fit 2 half notes equally into a whole note. Each half note is worth 2, 2 plus 2 is 4, and a whole note is worth 4. Each half note is worth 2 counts. If we divided it and split it into 2, 2 quarter notes would fit into 1 half note. Each quarter note is worth 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, half note is worth 2. So far we have 1 whole note, 2 half notes, 4 quarter notes. Dividing a quarter note equally into 2, we would be able to fit 2 eighth notes into 1 quarter note. Each eighth note is worth half a count, a half plus a half is 1, and a quarter note is worth 1 count. And finally, we're going to divide an eighth note into 2 equal parts, which would be 2 16th notes. Each 16th note is worth 1/4 of a beat. You put the 2/4 together, that gives you a half, which is what an eighth note is worth. To help you along the way with this, I put up a couple of sheets from this episode over on my website at SwissCheeseBeats.com. Hit the music tab, and under there you'll find Special Edition Series Episode 2, and you'll be able to download a couple of PDFs that have the value of each one of these notes for you. One other thing I would suggest is that if you're not fluent in being able to recall these note values immediately, is to make some flashcards, draw out the actual note, what it looks like, and then on the back, write what kind of note it is, why it's that type of note, as in what kind of note head it has, does it have a stem, how many flags, and then of course, what the value of that note is. Once you're able to recall each one of these quickly, then you're ready to start breaking down rhythms. In part 2, we're going to break down time signatures, and then we're also going to look at how these notes fit into measures of music. If you found this video helpful to you, please give us a thumbs up and consider sharing it. Question of the day is, what part of reading music have you found to be the most challenging? Leave those answers in the comments below and I'll be sure to respond. Thanks for stopping in. See you next time.